Good evening, guys. Today's presentation, we're going to have a quick recap, okay, about the anatomy and the anatomy questions related with other topics integrated that were asked in your NEET PG 2021 entrance examination. To start with the first question, it was an image-based question, right? This test is indicated for which of the following nerve? It's very obvious. It's the pen test, okay? So you should be having in the tip of your fingers. Pen test is for which nerve? Median nerve. Do you have idea about the movements of the thumb? What are the movements of the thumb? Can you see my thumb here? Yes. The movements of the thumb: flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, opposition. In abduction, okay, see, the tip of my thumb is facing towards the ceiling. Yeah, you should be able to differentiate abduction from the other movements of the thumb: flexion, extension, adduction. For abduction, the tip of the thumb, it comes towards the facing the ceiling. Yes. So what are the muscles which cause abduction at the thumb? Abductor pollicis longus, abductor pollicis brevis. Yes. Okay. Now in this image here, you can identify abductor pollicis brevis. It's one of your thenar muscles, right? Okay. And that's going to be supplied by median nerve. So in this image, with the position, you can identify that which action of the thumb is tested? Abduction. Okay. And what are the muscles responsible for abduction of the thumb? Two: abductor pollicis longus, abductor pollicis brevis. Abductor pollicis brevis is a thenar muscle supplied by the median nerve. What about abductor pollicis longus? Okay. You get to see it in the extensor compartment of the forearm. Remember here, this is your peeping muscles. We had a quick revision of anatomy before your exams. Remember where I revised this? The peeping muscles. Yes, passing through the first compartment, first extensor compartment. Abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis. Yeah. And these extensor muscles of the forearm, they are going to be supplied by radial nerve. Okay. Now, do you have a confusion? Which is the nerve involved in this case? Radial nerve or median nerve? I'm telling you it's median nerve. Okay. Why not radial nerve? There lies the secret. Abductor pollicis longus, abductor pollicis brevis. Where is the insertion of these two muscles? Tell me. Abductor pollicis longus that you see here originates from the radius ulnar interosseous membrane and inserts into base of your first metacarpal. Can you see the thumb here? This is your distal phalanx. This is the proximal phalanx. And this is your first metacarpal. Okay. Your abductor pollicis longus inserts into the base of the first metacarpal, right? Where is abductor pollicis brevis inserting? Into the proximal phalanx of the thumb, right? Into the proximal phalanx of the thumb. So the main action of abductor pollicis longus will be at the wrist, causing abduction of your wrist, okay, mainly. Whereas the abductor pollicis brevis, which inserts into the proximal phalanx of the thumb, is mainly involved in causing abduction of the thumb. So invariably, the answer for this question is pen test for median nerve. Okay, abduction mainly by abductor pollicis brevis inserting into proximal phalanx of the thumb. Okay, can you identify these tests? This is your Ochsner's clasping test, where you're unable to flex the index finger, right? And that sign is called pointing index. Again, here what's the problem? You're unable to flex the distal phalanx of the index finger. Okay, the tendon involved will be flexor digitorum profundus. That's going to be supplied by anterior interosseous nerve, which is again a branch of median nerve. So this test is again going to test your median nerve. Can you identify the image B and C? That's the book test, right? Okay, you're trying to hold the book using your thumb. What you're testing for is the adduction of the thumb. The adductor pollicis that's going to be supplied by, any idea? The ulnar nerve, the deep branch of the ulnar nerve. Okay, so this sign where you're unable to hold the book by adduction, sorry, you're flexing the thumb, isn't it? Okay, this is called Frohman sign. You're using your flexor to hold the book instead of your adductor. And the image C, that's the card test. Okay, adduction, testing the adduction of the digits that's caused by the palmar interossei, which is supplied by the ulnar nerves, right? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Second question, upper limb. A patient with multiple fracture of humerus, severe weakness, so humerus, severe weakness of flexion and supination of forearm, loss of cutaneous sensation of the lateral aspect of the forearm. Okay, so the main clue here is sensation lost over the lateral aspect of the forearm, which is supplied by lateral cutaneous nerve of forearm. That's the continuation or the termination of musculocutaneous nerve. Okay, so what are the nerves that are related to humerus? Over the surgical neck, it will be related to axillary nerve, right? And the spiral groove, the shaft of the humerus, will be related to radial nerve. Supracondyle, okay, just above the condyle, will be related to the median nerve. And medial epicondyle will be exclusively related to ulnar nerve. So many nerves are involved, right? But the main clue in this scenario is the loss of sensation over the lateral aspect of forearm. So this is your musculocutaneous nerve, which is going to supply the coracobrachialis, biceps brachii, and brachialis. Okay. The biceps brachii and brachialis, they cause flexion of forearm. And biceps brachii in addition will cause supination of forearm also. Okay. So the musculocutaneous nerve, after supplying these muscles, it pierces the deep fascia to supply the skin over the lateral part of your forearm. So you should have an idea about the cutaneous innervation of the entire upper limb. This skin over the shoulder region will be supplied by supraclavicular nerves, right? Okay. The arm, if you take the upper lateral aspect of the arm, okay, remember the lateral aspect of your arm, upper part and the lower part are going to be supplied by two different nerves. The upper lateral cutaneous nerve of arm is coming from axillary nerve. The lower lateral cutaneous nerve of arm is coming from radial nerve. So axillary nerve lesion, yeah, loss of sensation over the lateral aspect of the arm, what is that called? The regimental badge of anesthesia, right? Okay. Medial aspect of the arm, medial cutaneous nerve of arm. Okay. Here you should remember that the posteromedial aspect of the arm is going to be, the skin over the posteromedial aspect of the arm is going to be innervated by the intercostobrachial nerve. Okay. T2. Yes. Coming to the forearm, medial part by medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, again a branch coming from medial cord of brachial plexus. The lateral part of forearm, we have seen that, yeah, by the lateral cutaneous nerve of forearm, which is a continuation of musculocutaneous nerve, right? Okay. And coming to the posterior aspect of the upper limb, you should remember that the posterior cutaneous nerve of arm and forearm are branches coming from radial nerve. Okay. Most importantly, the nerve supply, cutaneous innervation of the palmar aspect and the dorsum of hand is important. Okay. So you must be knowing that the medial, the skin over the medial 1.5 digit is supplied by ulnar nerve. The skin over the lateral 3.5 digits on the palmar aspect will be supplied by median nerve. Okay. Whereas on the dorsum of the hand, okay, again, medial 1.5 is by ulnar nerve. Whereas the lateral 3.5, the skin over the dorsum is supplied by the superficial branch of radial nerve, right? except the skin over the terminal phalanx that will be innervated by the median nerve. Okay, guys. So in your upcoming exams, entrance exams, you can have questions over this. So you should be able to identify if an image-based question is given, what are the nerves here, okay? Upper lateral cutaneous nerve from maxillary nerve, lower lateral cutaneous nerve from radial nerve, over the shoulder by the supraclavicular nerve, medial aspect by medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm by medial cord of brachial plexus. Remember the posteromedial aspect of arm, I told you, intercostal brachial nerve. This is musculocutaneous nerve. Okay. Ulnar, median, radial. Yes, this was another question related to upper limb. Post mastectomy, patient develops swelling of left upper limb diagnosis. So invariably it goes with lymph edema of upper limb. So none of them are sure with the option C and D. Lymphatic drainage of upper limb. Okay, so post mastectomy involving axillary lymph node clearance that will lead to edematous upper limb mainly because of your lymphatic obstruction. Okay, lymphatic drainage of mammary gland is very, very, very important. So you know that in the axilla there are 5 group of lymph nodes. Yes, what are they? The anterior group, the posterior group, the lateral group. Okay, then you have the central group and apical group. Okay. Apart from that, you have the rotor or the interpectoral nodes between pectoralis major and minor. 75% of the lymphatics of the mammary gland will drain into which group here? The anterior group of axillary lymph nodes. Okay. And from there, they'll move on to the central, and from the central to the apical. Okay. 25% of the lymphatics from the mammary gland will drain into the intercostal lymph nodes, okay, which is situated in the sides of the sternum. They're also called the parasternal lymph nodes. Yes, okay. And some lymphatics from the deeper part of the gland, they can also go to the posterior. They can follow the posterior intercostal veins, posterior intercostal nodes, reach your vertebral venous plexus, leading to secondary deposits over there, right? Yes. So there were 3 questions from upper limb, right, related to upper limb. Now moving on to questions that were asked related to lower limb. Yeah. So during during graft from great saphenous vein, which nerve is damaged, causing loss of sensation over the medial side of leg and foot? So great saphenous vein, you should know the nerve accompanying it, and you should be sure which side of the leg and foot it's going to supply. Okay. So saphenous nerve. You'll see the explanation. So this is the dorsum of the foot. You see the dorsal venous arch here. The medial end of the dorsal venous arch is going to continue as great saphenous vein. So you can see the great saphenous here, great saphenous vein here. It runs medially upwards 2.5 centimeter in front of your medial malleoli, across the medial surface of the tibia. It goes behind the knee, posteromedial aspect of the knee, and then inclines upwards medially to enter the saphenous opening, where it's going to terminate into femoral vein. Okay, 3 centimeter below and lateral to the pubic tubercle. Now, what are the structures accompanying this entire great saphenous vein? You know, in the thigh, it can be accompanied by medial cutaneous nerve of thigh. Okay. In the knee, it will be accompanied by saphenous branch of descending genicular artery. That's the last branch of femoral artery. After that, it will be related to the saphenous nerve. Okay, you can see the saphenous nerve here. And in the region of the ankle, I told you the great saphenous vein lies 2.5 centimeter in front of the medial malleolus. And you can see the saphenous nerve closely related to it, right? Okay, so here remember the relation. The saphenous nerve lies anterior to the great saphenous vein. Okay, and it is more commonly injured. Okay, the other option, sural nerve, you should know, it doesn't accompany the great saphenous vein, but the short saphenous vein. Okay, and you can see it lying on the posterior aspect of the leg and supplying the skin over the lateral border of your foot. Okay, Now, this saphenous nerve, you should know that this is the saphenous nerve innervation. Okay, so it innervates the medial aspect of the lower part of the leg and also the dorsum of the foot up to the ball of the great toe. What do you mean by ball of the great toe? That's the projection produced by the first metatarsophalangeal joint. Okay, the skin of the dorsum up to that area will be innervated by the saphenous nerve. Okay, and what is our rest of the innervation? Cutaneous innervation to the dorsum of the foot. This is the first interdigital cleft that will be innervated by the deep peroneal nerve. Okay, the lateral border, which is shown in blue, that's the area of the skin that is innervated by sural nerve. The major part of the dorsum of the foot is going to receive its sensory supply from, any idea? The superficial peroneal nerve. So in our case, the sensation was lost along the medial side of the dorsum of the foot. So the nerve involved is saphenous nerve. Even this question was discussed in a rapid revision just before the exams. Okay. So this is a question related to anatomy. Hip pain. The patient presented with a hip pain and the lower limb shortened with flexion, adduction, and internal rotation. The diagnosis is obviously posterior dislocation of the hip joint. Okay. Why? Because this is the only one which presents with internal rotation. Yeah. All the others will be presenting with external rotation. The mechanism of injury is also called dashboard injury. Okay. Okay. So here mainly occurs due to automobile accidents. You can see the hip is in flex position, adducted, and medially rotated. So what is happening here? Normally, the head of the femur is going to articulate with the acetabulum, okay, the socket. Yeah. But in posterior dislocation, what is happening there? You can see the head dislocate out of position from its socket. Where is it going to lie? In the gluteal region. Yeah. Another point, it's just because of the internal rotation attitude of the hip, the lesser trochanter, okay, will not be prominent. It's turning medially. And another question that you might relate to this is the sciatic nerve lies, this is a posterior view, okay? You can see the sciatic nerve lying immediately behind the hip joint. So in a posterior dislocation, the nerve that gets injured is your sciatic nerve. And sciatic nerve, you know, it supplies most of your hamstrings and the muscles of the leg, both the anterior compartment, posterior compartment, and the lateral compartment, and the foot. Okay. Okay. So coming to questions of anatomy in thorax region, there was a question on feeble pulses in the femoral artery, increased pressure in upper limb arteries, and prominent posterior intercostal arteries. The option that everyone remembers only coarctation of the aorta, right? No one is sure with the other options. Yeah. So coarctation of aorta, what do you mean by that? Narrowing of the aorta. Yes. At which point? Distal to the origin of left subclavian artery. Okay. So the blood supply to the lower part of the body is compromised. Okay. That's the reason why the pulse in the lower limb and the blood pressure in the lower limb is low. Okay. Now what happens normally? So you see the subclavian artery here and the internal thoracic coming from the first part of the subclavian artery. Okay. The internal thoracic artery is going to give rise to the anterior intercostal arteries, right? You see the internal thoracic artery, the anterior intercostal arteries. These anterior intercostal artery, which arise from the internal thoracic artery, are going to anastomose with posterior intercostal arteries. Okay. The posterior intercostal arteries, they arise from the descending aorta. Okay. Now, what is happening in coarctation of aorta? Reduced blood flow through the descending aorta. So there'll be reduced blood flow through the posterior intercostal arteries. To compensate for this, what will happen? Okay, the blood will flow. Okay, there'll be increased blood flow through the internal thoracic artery, into the anterior intercostal artery, and through the anastomosis into the posterior intercostal artery, and then into the descending aorta. Okay, the collateral circulation goes like this. Okay, yeah. Now, what is happening? Very typical feature noted is, okay, these posterior intercostal artery, okay, which are reduced in size but are going to receive amount of blood flow from the anterior intercostal arteries, they become tortuous. The posterior intercostal arteries, they become tortuous. Okay, and here you can make it out. These notches here in the lower border of the ribs, which can be appreciated in the X-rays. Yeah, notching of ribs. Very, very characteristic, typical of coarctation of aorta. Now I'm going to ask you something. There is not going to be any notching in the first and second rib. Can you tell me why? Yes, because what did I tell you? The posterior intercostal arteries, normally they arise from the descending aorta. Okay, except the first two spaces. They come from the superior intercostal artery. That's the branch again from costocervical trunk. That comes from subclavian artery. Okay. The first and the second posterior intercostal artery, they do not come from the descending aorta. They arise from superior intercostal artery, which in turn comes from the costocervical trunk. So the first two ribs are usually do not show the notching. Got it? Okay. So this was another question related to anatomy. Where is the foreign body located in the given picture? Yes, all of you must be knowing that it's in the right esophagus. How to differentiate whether it's in the trachea or esophagus? That's what I'm going to teach you now. Yes, can you tell me which one of these two pictures represents the trachea or the esophagus? This is the esophagus. Can you see the word slit here, or horizontally compressed slit? Okay, so normally the esophagus is compressed like this. Yeah, only when the food passes through it, it's going to expand. Whereas the trachea, yeah, it's kept open by the presence of your C-shaped cartilages and the trachealis smooth muscle, which is behind. Okay, so imagine putting a coin into the piggy bank and into this pipe. Okay, so how will it go? And you're taking a picture from front. Yes, can you see that there? So a coin in the esophagus, remember, in an AP view, it's going to appear like this. Okay, perfect circle. In a lateral view, it will appear like this. Whereas ulta of it in the trachea. Can you appreciate this? The lumen of the trachea. So you see the trachea in front, the esophagus behind. Yes. So imagine yourself putting a coin into it. Yeah. The trachea, I told you, the lumen is kept open by the tracheal cartilages made up of hyaline and the trachealis smooth muscle behind. Okay, can you see the lumen here because of the enormous smooth musculature of the esophageal wall? The lumen is kept closed like a horizontal slit. Okay, guys, understood? Okay, that's with abdomen. Now moving on to the anatomy questions in abdomen region. A patient of splenomegaly with spleen reaching 15 centimeter from costal margin. Which structure prevents the spleen from enlarging downwards? Yeah. So the ligaments of spleen. So you can see the spleen here, right? So the gastrosplenic ligament extends from the stomach to the spleen. It contains the short gastric vessels. It contains your left gastroepiploic vessels, right? And then you have the ligament extending from the kidney to the spleen, also called the lieno-renal ligament. Okay, this will have your splenic vessels. Yes, the lymphatic nerve and also the tail of pancreas. Okay, now there's one important ligament here called the phrenicocholic ligament. Okay, which can you see the transverse colon here? It's going to continue as the descending colon. So this point is your left colic flexure. You can see the ligament here, peritoneal fold extending from the left colic flexure to the diaphragm. That's called the phrenico-colic ligament. Okay. So this incidentally, it supports the lower end of the spleen. Okay. Just because of the presence of this ligament, the spleen cannot, okay, extend downwards in case of an enlargement. As you see here, in case of splenomegaly, the direction of enlargement of the spleen will be towards the spino-umbilical line, okay, towards the umbilicus, and enormous enlargement can push it even towards the right iliac fossa, okay. So that's how we exclude the other options. Okay. Spinal TB with swelling in groin, lower limb is flexed and medially rotated. Okay. Which of the following marked structures involved? So I heard that the structures marked where this was, you need a different color. I'll take a red one. So this is A, this is B, C, and D. Okay. So, excuse me, 1 second, I'll take the blue back. Okay. You see the vertebral column here? Yeah. So what is, we are talking about the A option here is psoas major muscle. Okay. So the psoas major muscle, you should know that, okay, is the one extending from the abdomen, posterior abdominal wall, behind the inguinal ligament. It continues into the, yes, your upper thigh. Okay. And it's going to be covered by the psoas fascia, which is open up. So the any tubercular spine, the abscess can track down beneath the psoas fascia and enter the lower limb. If you want to identify the other structures here, A is psoas major muscle. Can you see the, yeah, this is your acetabulum here. The acetabulum, the head of the femur, yeah, the greater trochanter. So this is your psoas major, I told you. This is your hip bone. So what is there on the anterior aspect of the hip bone? That's the iliacus muscle. On sides of the vertebra, paravertebral in position is psoas major. B, this one will be your iliacus muscle originating from the iliac fossa of the hip bone. Behind, this will be the gluteal region with the gluteus medius and minimus muscle. Right? Here, this is the urinary bladder. This one lower down in relation to the obturator membrane, this will be obturator internus. Just below that will be obturator externus. You see the femur here. This will be your quadriceps. And medially, these all will be your adductor muscles. So among the option given, the best one here will be the paravertebral position, the psoas major muscle. Okay. So the psoas major muscle, as you see here, I told you, paravertebral originating from the anterior surface of the transverse process from the sides of the body of the lumbar vertebra. Okay. You can see the iliacus here, psoas major here. It's going to be covered by the psoas fascia. Lower down, it will be covered by the fascia iliaca. You can see it entering the femoral triangle there. So your sartorius. Can you see the psoas tendon here? Where does it go for insertion? Yes, into the lesser trochanter of femur, right? Okay, and spasm of this muscle will produce flexion and medial rotation. Yeah, so this is your iliacus there. Remember the psoas tendon, okay? This is your femoral vessels within the femoral sheath. The anterior wall of the femoral sheath, can you tell me what is the fascia there? Fascia transversalis. Posterior wall of the femoral sheath, fascia iliaca, which is going to cover both, yes, iliacus and psoas major muscle. So the psoas tendon anteriorly related to the femoral artery, posterior to the capsule of the hip joint, medially related to the femoral vein, laterally related to the femoral nerve. Okay. So it's because of the psoas fascia, which is open above, the abscess can track down, okay, in front of the muscle and moves downwards into the upper part of your thigh and presents as a swelling there. Again, this is another question. I just want to talk about the anatomy part of it. What is the modality of this test? Hysterosalpingography. Okay, mainly done to, yes, to image the shape of the uterus and patency of your fallopian tubes. Yeah, using a contrast. So to identify any congenital anomalies of the uterus. Yeah, bicornuvate, unicornuvate, didelphys uterus, all that. And patency, whether there's any block in the fallopian tube. Abdomen, the fourth question, yeah. A patient presented in OPD with complaints of abdominal distension. Other symptoms suggestive of intestinal obstruction. Identify the part of the bowel distended there. Okay, so you can see that here, the part of the bowel distended here. These are the loops of jejunum. Why not ileum? Why not duodenum? Why not transverse colon? So how did we identify it as jejunum? Presence of these circular. Can you make out these folds here within the lumen of the jejunum, giving it a feathery appearance? That is called as plica circularis or the valvulae conniventus. What are these? These are mucosal folds. Okay, within the lumen, these are permanent mucosal folds present in the small intestine. Okay, but absent, please make a note of it. These plica circularis is absent in the proximal 1 inch of your duodenum and terminal 6 inches of ileum. Okay, guys. Okay. So the jejunum, it contributes to 2/5 of your small intestine. Yes. So though plica circularis is present in duodenum, except the first part, in the jejunum, in the ileum, except the terminal 6 inches, you can make it out here. These plica circularis in the jejunum are larger, thick, and closely set. Okay, guys. Order of ligation of devascularization in a PPH. Yes. So you should know the blood supply of uterus. Yeah. So you know the uterus is going to be supplied invariably by uterine artery. Where is the uterine artery coming from? Yes. Anterior division of internal iliac artery. Okay. And also by the ovarian artery. Ovarian artery, the gonadal arteries come from your abdominal aorta. So you can see the uterine artery here, tortuous. It's going to ascend up. Okay. Now this uterine artery is going to anastomose with the ovarian artery at the lateral angle. Yeah, can you see here? At the lateral angle of the uterus. So the first one to be ligated will be the uterine artery, the ovarian artery, and then the internal iliac artery. Other choices you can see it's having pudendal artery, obturator artery, vaginal artery, which can be excluded. Got it? Then, old aged individual, hernia neck medial to the inferior epigastric vessel. Okay, coming to the anatomy part of it. So inguinal ring, inguinal canal, this is the deep inguinal ring, which is an opening in fascia transversalis, right? Superficial inguinal ring, that's an opening in external oblique upper neurosis. Okay. And yeah, in indirect inguinal hernia, the contents enter through the deep inguinal, traverse the inguinal canal, and exit through the superficial inguinal ring. What happens in direct inguinal hernia? The contents enter through a weaker part of the abdomen, that's the Hasselbalch's triangle. What are the boundaries of Hasselbalch's triangle? Medially by lateral border of rectus abdominis muscle, laterally by the inferior epigastric vessels, and below by the inguinal ligament. So in case of direct hernia, yes, coming out through the Hasselbalch's triangle into the inguinal canal, the neck of the hernial sac will lie medial to the inferior epigastric vessels. Okay. And of course, always it's For direct hernia, it is the Lichtenstein repair. Yeah. So this was a nice question asked. The nerve injured following removal of submandibular gland and its duct. Okay. I go with the lingual nerve. Okay. Even Gray's Anatomy tells that. So this is a submandibular gland. You can see that. So this is the superficial part. That's the deep part of the submandibular gland. Can you identify the muscle which divides the superficial and the deep part? That's the mylohyoid muscle. Okay. So this is the anterior border of the mylohyoid, posterior border of the mylohyoid. Yes. So the superficial part in front of the mylohyoid, the deep part going behind it. Okay. Now, I want you to concentrate. So imagine the submandibular gland here. It has three surfaces. Inferior surface in contact with the skin. Medial surface will be in contact with the mylohyoid shown here. The lateral surface will be in contact with what's the bone here? The ramus of the mandible. Are you with me? Inferior surface with the skin, medial surface with the mylohyoid, and the lateral surface in contact with the ramus of the mandible. So here, the nerve relations of submandibular gland are important. The inferior surface of the submandibular gland will be related to skin, superficial fascia. What do you have beneath the superficial fascia? Platysma. Okay. Platysma, and then investing layer of deep cervical fascia, submandibular lymph nodes. This platysma is going to be supplied by cervical branch of facial nerve. Can you see the nerve here? This is nothing but the cervical branch of facial nerve, right? Okay, and close to it in the anteroinferior angle of masseter, yeah, you can see the facial vein is crossed by the another nerve, marginal mandibular nerve. Okay, yes. Now coming to the medial part. Okay, coming to the lateral part, what I told you, related to the ramus of the mandible. But the submandibular gland is separated from the ramus of the mandible or related to the medial pterygoid muscle and the loop of the facial artery there. Okay. So this is the submandibular fossa of the mandible which lodges the gland. The muscle inserting into the medial surface of the ramus will be medial pterygoid. Outer surface of the ramus will be masseter. Okay, so it will be related to the medial pterygoid and the loop of the facial artery there. Coming to the medial surface of the submandibular gland, that is extensive. The anterior part of it is related to, what is the muscle that you see here? Mylohyoid. But can you see something here? Separating the mylohyoid muscle from the superficial part of the submandibular gland. That's the nerve to mylohyoid and the submental branch of facial artery. Nerve to mylohyoid and submental branch of facial artery, right? If you further go behind, yes, posterior aspect of the medial surface will be related to styloglossus. So this is stylopharyngeus. This is styloglossus, glossopharyngeal nerve, the hypoglossal nerve, the first part of lingual artery. Okay. The intermediate part of the superficial part of submandibular gland will be resting on hyoglossus muscle. Okay. And over that, it will be related to the lingual nerve, the submandibular ganglion. Okay, guys. So inferior surface, cervical branch of facial nerve, marginal mandibular nerve. Lateral surface is related only to the facial artery. Medial surface, you can see the glossopharyngeal nerve, the hypoglossal nerve. Okay, also the lingual nerve. Of all this, the one which carries an intimate relation with the submandibular duct is the lingual nerve. Can you make out the submandibular duct here? Yes. Okay. So the lingual nerve, it presents a triple relation with the submandibular duct. Okay. Initially, the nerve will, you can see the nerve lying above, yes, above the duct, lateral to the duct, and then it goes below the duct. Okay, it goes below the lower border and ascends medially. So above, lateral, and then medially. Okay, the lingual nerve. This is the triple relation of the nerve to the duct. So there's big difficulty while separating the nerve and the duct, and it has higher chance of getting injured. Okay. So if the marginal mandibular nerve gets injured, what will happen? It's going to supply the muscles of lower lip. That will lead to paralysis of those muscles. Hypoglossal nerve, it supplies the muscles of the tongue, paralysis of the tongue muscle. Lingual nerve, it not only carries the general sensation from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, the chorda tympani nerve joins the lingual nerve, right? So even the taste sensation from anterior two-thirds of the tongue can be lost in lingual nerve injury. Okay. It also carries the secretomotor fibers for the submandibular and sublingual salivary gland. So in this case, the nerve injured will be lingual nerve because of its intimate relation with the submandibular duct. Okay. Following complete thyroidectomy, anesthetist finds it difficult to extubate the patient due to repeated obstruction. Most probable cause, yes, the anatomical concept behind this. Yeah, you have a right recurrent laryngeal nerve, left recurrent laryngeal nerve. The left recurrent laryngeal nerve hooks around the arch of aorta. Right recurrent laryngeal nerve hooks around the subclavian artery, and both ascend in the tracheoesophageal groove, accompanied by inferior laryngeal vessels, yeah, which is a branch of inferior thyroid artery. Yes, okay. Now, this recurrent laryngeal nerve is going to supply all the muscles of larynx except, come on, tell me, cricothyroid. Okay, more importantly, it supplies the posterior cricoarytenoid. Remember, we saw this question also in a rapid revision. That's the abductor. The only abductor of your vocal cord. Okay. So in bilateral recurrent laryngeal nerve palsy, what happens? Both the cords, they lie in paramedian position, unable to abduct. Okay. That will cause the obstruction and difficult extubation. Now, head and neck, third question that was asked is, middle-aged man suffering from epistaxis not relieved by nasal packing. Next step of management, artery of epistaxis, right? Sphenopalatine artery is called the artery of epistaxis. Why? The long sphenopalatine artery, it arises from maxillary artery. Okay, I'm just discussing the anatomic concept of the question. Maxillary artery, the internal maxillary artery, the third part of the internal maxillary artery will give rise to your long sphenopalatine artery, the greatest sphenopalatine artery that will enter the nasal cavity through the sphenopalatine foramen. Okay, and it will divide into branches. Okay, lateral branches and septal branches to supply both the lateral wall and the nasal septum. So the antero-inferior portion of the nasal septum, which is called the Little's area, you have the Kieselbach's fluxus contributed by branch from facial artery, you have sphenopalatine artery, greater palatine artery. Okay. So here, because of its major contribution to the plexus, we call it as the artery of epistaxis. The most suitable answer for the question asked. Okay. A patient presented with difficulty in swallowing. Physician touched the following area to test which nerve. There are a lot of controversy in this question. Confusion, which one was touched? Whether it was the soft palate or the posterior pharyngeal wall. There was a doubt in the question also. What was the question asked? What is the nerve supply to the market structure? Yeah. If they're going to ask you what is the nerve supply to the market structure, you remember that the muscles of the soft palate, the pharynx are going to be supplied by pharyngeal plexus. Okay. The major contribution to the pharyngeal plexus is coming from vagus nerve. That's why in gag reflex, the efferent component, yeah, we check the vagus nerve. So the most appropriate answer for this question will be the vagus nerve. 33-year-old female with complaints of diminishing vision on the right half of both eyes. Probable diagnosis. Right half of both the eyes. Contralateral optic tract. Yes, the left optic tract. It's a very straightforward question. Should be thorough with the visual pathway. This is also another straightforward question. Which vessel aneurysm impinges on the optic chiasma? You should remember that the optic chiasma is a midline structure, isn't it? So of the following arteries mentioned here, the anterior communicating artery that you see here, connecting the anterior cerebral arteries of both the sides, that's again a midline structure. So any aneurysm of the anterior communicating artery can impinge on the optic chiasma. Okay. So this 12-year-old with history of fever, ear discharge, CT brain show the following. What is the diagnosis? So you see an abnormality here. So it's not your cerebellum. So this image you can identify. I'll take a different color. Okay. So here these are your cerebellar hemispheres, right? Cerebellar hemispheres. This is pons. This one here, that's your basilar artery. In front of the pons, yes. In the midline, that's the basilar artery. These are the temporal lobes of the brain, right? Here will be your frontal lobe. So it's very clear that the lesion is present in the, yes, what's the answer? Tell me. The temporal region of the brain, correct? Yeah. Last structure to be pierced in the lumbar puncture. You know, lumbar punctures were done to withdraw CSF. Yes, where is the CSF situated? In the subarachnoid space. Subarachnoid space lies between the dura mater and the arachnoid. Okay, so only when you enter the arachnoid, you'll be able to withdraw the subarachnoid space. I am sorry. The subarachnoid space lies between the arachnoid and the pia mater, below the arachnoid, right? So the last structure to be pierced will be arachnoid. Also, I had been circulating this mnemonic in the Telegram groups. Yeah. So please remember, like frequently they've been asking questions related to lumbar puncture. The most comfortable position to do lumbar puncture will be at the level of L3 to L4. Okay, and sometimes they'll ask you what is the ligament which is not pierced by the needle in lumbar puncture. Yeah, so you should be thorough with this. Structures pierced by the needle in lumbar puncture from outer to inner, the skin, superficial fascia, supraspinous ligament, interspinous ligament. Ligamentum flavum is nothing but the ligament that connects the bodies, the lamina of the vertebrae, areolar tissue in the epidural space, dura mater, then the arachnoid mater. Okay, guys? Okay. A patient diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is a demyelinating disorder. Yeah, the cells which are involved in myelination of the neurons of the central nervous system is oligodendrocytes. It's a very straightforward question. Identify the given image. I think that should be the easiest question, isn't it? Circumvallate papillae. Okay, so this is a circumvallate papillae. You can see the taste buds in the sides. Taste bud in the sides. Okay, this part is the vallet or the groove. Okay, now I'm going to ask you something here. Can you tell me what are these acini? What are the glands that you see here? These are the serous acini of the von Ebner's gland that empty the secretions into that vallate, sulcus surrounding the circumvallate papillae. Any idea about the nerve supply to the circumvallate papillae? The taste buds here will be supplied by your glossopharyngeal nerve, right? So you should be able to differentiate it from the fungiform papillae and the filiform papillae. The filiform papillae, though it is most numerous, it doesn't carry any taste buds. Okay. The fungiform papillae is less numerous. You can see it in the tip of the tongue, the sides of the tongue, okay? And the taste buds here will be actually present in the top. Okay, guys. And here the taste sensation is carried by your chorda tympani branch of seventh nerve, right? Okay, this is another straightforward question. Which vessel carries deoxygenated blood? Yeah, the umbilical artery. Even in the adult, the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary arteries, they carry the deoxygenated blood into the lungs, isn't it? Okay, guys, to summarize, trust me, there were around 25 questions. Okay, anatomy, related to anatomy, integrated with anatomy. 3 from upper limb, okay, 2 questions from lower limb. Yeah, we discussed the pen test here. Yeah, here also we discussed the innervation dorsum of foot innervation. We did discuss in our rapid revision. Thorax, 3 questions were there. Abdomen, yes, 6 questions. Head and neck, we discussed about the recurrent laryngeal nerve palsy. Neuroanatomy, we discussed in our rapid revision about the structures pierced by the needle in lumbar puncture. Okay. So if you see that, yes, of course, anatomy and anatomy related questions from correlated integrated with mainly with surgery, orthopedics, radiology, yes, OBG, ENT, ophthalmology, and even pathology. Okay, guys. So now that you're done with your entrance examination, yes, keep your mind filled with positive thoughts, okay, and expect magic to happen. We'll wind up the session. Thank you, guys.